My apologies. That was, well, I guess it was my fault, but often if I do something like that, if I cut myself off, it's because I've clicked on something that I shouldn't have and messed myself up. But here, what happened was I got a message. Oh, the video just shut off. Saying there's no more space available, so you need to delete previous videos on your camera roll to make space for the rest of this. So, that being said, I'll try to be aware of that for the future. So this will be lecture one, part two. So my apologies. Um, okay, that being said, I was talking about education and expanding one's mind and understanding, and how from the Latin educatio, educare, to be led out of. That is what education is about. To see new things, to experience new things, to have your mind blown. It's that, the cartoon with the little light bulb goes on. When you get it, that can't be quantified. AI can't make that little light bulb go on at you. You have to challenge yourself. That's what it's about. That being said, then, before we come back to act professionally and all those things and the keys to success, in my view, for this course, let's go and just look at the Middle Ages as the foundation of modernity, which too is setting up this course as a point of departure. And some of these I've already mentioned, but I want to start here in terms of the Middle Ages as the foundation of modernity, is not simply um, falling into a very common fallacy. A fallacy is a false argument or a wrong argument. There is one, it's called, well, it's in Latin. It's post hoc ergo propter hoc. After this, therefore because of this. That is a logical fallacy. The Middle Ages were not the foundation of modernity simply because they came before modernity. And what is modernity? That too is a category that, we fabricate to as a category to refer to things. But it is the foundation of what allowed and made possible modernity. For example, the university, what we are in right now, is a medieval institution, a medieval Western European institution. There are centers of learning previously, but not every center of learning was a university. The focus on reason was a medieval development, and that is, we consider this issue of the Middle Ages as an age of faith or an age of reason, where natural causation was seen as the proper approach to understanding nature. These were people who were very creative, very brilliant, very insightful. And up there too on that slide is, we are giants on whose shoulders we stand, which is a medieval concept. If we can see further than our predecessors, it's only because we are, we're short, but we're standing on the shoulders of giants. It's that approach and attitude I would like for you to come to recognize is indeed the case. Just because we see things differently or have different understandings of things today than they did in the period approximately 1000 to 1500 CE doesn't mean that we are right and they are wrong. We couldn't see what we have seen if it wasn't for these giant people. I don't mean physically giants. These bigger than life people whose intellect was amazing. That's what we're going to be looking at. That's what we're going to be seeing. And who've dealt with difficult problems. We think we deal with difficult problems. We do. We do. Now, this is not going into the issue of history repeating itself. I will argue that history never repeats itself, ever. But what remains a constant is human nature. We need to come to an understanding of respect and awe of our forebearers. Not that they are right, not to say, oh yes, and so therefore they're better, and so we're going to go back to following what they did. No. But it's on that basis, on their shoulders, that we can climb up and look and see further and make further discoveries and understandings and developments. That's the concept. Now, the Middle Ages, as such. See the unknown Middle Ages up there? Yeah, well, that's because of the common myths that are out there. Knights and castles. And Game of Thrones is a medieval thing. It's not medieval. Nothing about medieval. And so there's this popularization of a myth. And a myth is, I'll be talking about it, I think, again, next lecture or so. As I talk about in the document, History, Religion, Theology, and Myth, or whatever it is assigned for this week. As I use it here, it's not false. Myth is not false. It is a different level of truth. I refer to it as mythopoetic truth. That's not literally, scientifically true. It gets at an experience that is valid and true, even if through a story or something else. Now, these myths that are out there about the Middle Ages are not only myths in that sense, but they're also myths in terms of being wrong, even if they're based on some part of historical reality, as best as we can see. And I'll be talking more about this in terms of the Dark Ages and the origins of that next lecture, which really was the development of of Renaissance humanists, which I view the Renaissance as part of the Middle Ages, as I'll be talking about in this course, who considered themselves to have been affecting a rebirth of classical antiquity. And they said, what has come between us and the fall of Rome? Just one long Middle Age, a dark period. And that then was repeated and given form by the Swiss historian Jakob Burckhardt in his classic study, The Civilization of Renaissance in Italy. And it has stuck ever since. I'll be saying more about that next lecture. But it's to overcome some of those understandings. Were there castles? Yes. Were there knights? Yes. That's not the focus of this course, but they were there. Were people Christian? Yes, depending on what you mean by that. That too, I should say. Because I've had people ask me this. I've had students ask me this, usually in Western civilization, not students in this course, but just to make sure. The distinction between Catholic and Christian. First of all, there is no distinction. Catholic simply means universal. For this course, and for the Reformation as I teach it too, Catholicism, or being Catholic, and being Christian are one and the same. It's only during the 16th century, from 1530 on, that we can begin to talk about Roman Catholicism as distinct from other types of Christian denominations, or what we today refer to as Christian denominations. In the Middle Ages, they're one and the same. And so were the Middle Ages, the High Late Middle Ages, an age of faith in the terms that everyone was Christian? Yes, except for the Jews internally within Europe, and the Muslims on the outside of Europe being a threat, as we'll talk more about that too, certainly. But what did it mean to be Christian? We'll be talking a fair amount about that too, because that was an issue that they dealt with constantly. Well, not constantly, but at least major developments, and to say, what does it mean to be Christian? What does it mean to be Christian? Aside from being baptized and attending Christian worship, going to Mass. Yeah. They're struggling with that. So an age of faith, yes, but they're struggling with it by use of their reason, by analyzing. So can we say it's an age of reason? Well, we can't really say it's an age of reason as opposed to an age of faith. How do we describe this chronological development? That's what this course is about. How do we describe it and understand it? Because how we describe the past that does not exist affects how we understand it. And still is valid today. If there is an oppositional group to the government in some South American country, are they freedom fighters or are they revolutionaries? Think about that. It depends on whom you ask. We would think of freedom fighters as being good things. We think of revolutionaries as being bad things. And yet our country meaning the United States, started as a bunch of revolutionaries. No, they weren't. They were freedom fighters. Those different terms affect the meaning that we attribute to things in the past. And this is a philosophical issue that I would claim, and actually a very good friend of mine in the philosophy department here, Samuel Kahn, and he disagrees with me, so I just want to point that out. But for me, I said there's no meaning inherent in being. Meaning is always ascribed to being. What did the Crusades mean? Yeah, that's distinct from, let's say, the phenomena of the Crusades themselves. How do we ascribe meaning? And on what basis do we do so? Do we do so based on what we think meaning is? Or do we try to understand the meaning in the past, the people in the past ascribed to their own world and their own lives? That is the approach I try to take. And then based on that meaning, the meaning that people in the past ascribe to their own lives and experiences, how does that affect our understanding of our attributed meaning to the period and our own attributed meaning to ourselves and our experience in the world in which we find ourselves? Well, this is philosophical. Yeah, it is. I'm not apologizing for that because everything we do, there's a reason behind it. And it affects our understanding. And I'm not going to go too much into all of this. I'll talk a little bit more about this next lecture. But how we understand the past, whatever that is, including yesterday, I would argue, but I'm not going to go into that argument. But anything, as we understand the past, we assume things that we can't understand it, for one. Number two, we assume what it's based on. Memory is a wonderful thing. It's also very selective. None of us were around during the Middle Ages. The people left things, they wrote things, and some of those things that were written or constructed or built or made have survived today, in the present. And those are the artifacts that signify that which no longer exists. And that's what we study. And that's why also the primary document readings, the source readings, are so important. Now, all that being said, this is kind of throwing a lot out there all at the beginning. How do we go about it? I mean, I say, I've already talked about the giants on whose shoulders we stand. So how do you manage this whole course? And the so what for, how do I go about it? And here on the last slide here, I have stay engaged, manage time, keep up with the readings and assignments, ask questions, reach out, get excited, be professional. Those, to me, are the keys to success. Perhaps most important of all is manage your time. An in-person course, if this were an in-person course, we'd be meeting twice a week for 75 minutes, an hour and 15 minutes. So 2 hours and a half a week. The old rule of thumb, and I say old because I'm not sure what the administration now would say. The old rule of thumb was for every hour spent in class, you should spend 2 hours outside of class preparing and working on it. So that would mean 2 hours outside of class for every hour, so that would be 5 hours outside of class per week. Now, 5 hours a week doesn't seem like much, but then, of course, you have to spend the hour and 15 minutes in class, which includes listening to the lectures. So you need to make sure that you have sufficient time to listen to the lectures, to do the reading, to do the assignments. Now, also, professionally speaking, we can't quantify learning. Your work in this course is not based on an hourly wage, so to speak. It's not like, okay, 35 hours a week, you put it in your time and you're done. Also, because I know you have other classes to do too, and other things in your lives to do too. The first U.S. university that I had a job at in orientation, the person from Human Resources told us, for faculty, doesn't matter how long you work. You have a job to do. If it takes you 20 hours a week, good for you. You're lucky. If it takes you 60 hours a week, well, you got to do it because you have to get the job done. Being a student is being a professional like that. You need to do the job. Put in the effort to get the job done. And it's difficult. It's difficult. I'm here to help with that. That's what it's about. So manage your time. If you manage your time, then keep up with the reading. So you have to manage your time so that you can keep up with the reading, because there is a fair amount of reading, even forgetting, at least for now, the suggested readings, which is extra. But you need to do the reading. And reading is difficult. It's not just putting your eyes across the page. I talk about this too in the introduction to the course document. You have to be engaged in reading. All reading is active, interactive reading, where you're interacting with the text that you're reading. Same with listening to the lectures. It's not just like la 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 la. That's the second say, okay, I've listened to it, blah. It's interacting with it, whether it is in person in the classroom or here on video. You need to be questioning, thinking, pondering. That's what being engaged is about. And if you're engaged, and I can almost guarantee this, I'm not saying this is a law or anything, but the more engaged you are, the better your grade will be. Because it makes you do the work. And if you can find your special interest that you have, and if your special interest is in castles and war and knights, great. Try to use that to understand everything else that this course will be talking about. Use what you have to grasp and incorporate this information as it expands your mind, whether you really want it to or not. Because you could really try to keep it from expanding your mind. You could say, I'm not really going to pay attention to this. I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to let it affect me. That's not the way to get a good grade in this course. That's not a good way to become an educated person. That's not a good way to be able to be a responsible person in society. Dare to open yourself up. Dare to challenge yourself. To be thrown into a foreign culture, which is the past. It can be scary, but that's what it is, and that's what's required in terms of doing well in this course. In so many ways, I wish we didn't even have to have grades. I understand the importance. I understand, let's say, the necessity of grades. And I understand the practicalities that is one of your interests. And it's one thing for me to say, yeah, grades don't matter, and what matters is the learning. But I remember very well, believe me, that on the other side of this video screen, if you're listening, grades do matter. And so that practical aspect of how to get the best grade you possibly can, I also recognize and realize is important. And that too is something that you can reach out to me with questions. That is also being part of being engaged, is reaching out. And if you're struggling with something, get help. If you have a problem, meaning let's say, that you I said that the firm deadlines are firm deadlines, but let's say that the night before the midterm you're in an automobile accident and you're in the hospital. If you can prove that, great. We'll work something out. I'm not going to say, "Oh, sorry, you knew the deadline." I'm not going to do that. I've heard that there are professors that do, and I think that's really repulsive and wrong. I will not. But don't. I'm willing to work with you, but don't try to mess with me, so to speak. Okay. Um, one of the good examples is also another university. Um, this professor was talking to us. He was the chair of the department, and saying that he had this one student who, had missed a midterm or something like that because his mother had died, and then also had trouble getting through the final because his mother had died. He was very sympathetic to it, clearly. And the kid, I think, ended up failing anyway. And then after the semester with the final grades, he gets a telephone call, and it's from the kid's mom. He says, "Oh, Mrs. Johnson, how lovely to talk with you." That is something you shouldn't do. If there's a problem, let me know. Life happens. I'm very aware of that, believe me, in my own life. So be professional, accept the responsibility, get excited, be engaged, ask questions, ask for help if needed, reach out. I'm here to help you. And I hope you enjoy it. And I hope after this course, you'll look back and say, wow, that's why this course was so important and so interesting. That's my hope. I'm an idealist. I'm not an idealist that doesn't recognize practicalities. So, again, reach out. Let's talk. I'll help you through it. With that being said, again, welcome to the course. And next lecture um, will be then on more history and what is history and doing history and how we approach these things. Before then, in week 2, getting into the historical development of essentially squeezing one course, if not 2 courses, into just a couple of weeks. So yeah, I will see you again shortly, and we'll go from there. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.